Thank you for joining us. You're watching a career success video from Computer Coach. Computer Coach is a Tampa-based computer training center specializing in helping IT and business professionals add on the skills they need to reach their desired career goals. If you are job searching, in transition, or are looking for guidance, please feel free to reach out to us at www.computercoach.com. Now, let's get started.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today on, it's mid-March already. My name is Danielle Ori. I'm the Director of Career Services here at Computer Coach. We are a technical training school based in Tampa Bay, Florida, with the beautiful weather. At Computer Coach, we are really focused on empowering individuals as well as corporations through comprehensive IT training courses. That's upskilling, continuing education, and certification training. We have both full-time and part-time courses in cybersecurity, which we'll touch on quite a bit today, coding, infrastructure and data, as well as those tech adjacent areas like project management and digital marketing. So let's make sure we're optimizing our time together. If we haven't met, if we haven't, gotten together as friends on LinkedIn, let's go ahead and drop our LinkedIn in the chat and make sure we are connecting with one another and making friends. I'm excited for our presentation today. As my counterpart here, Cassandra Perez, our Director of Admissions, just stated, this is what everyone wants to know about, building relationships with recruiting agencies. Before I turn it over to our guest speaker, I'd like to invite you to use the Q&A feature to add your questions, which we'll address at the end. If it's not convenient, you can certainly put them in the chat. We'll make sure we scan through those as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Pete, and then we have some things at the end that we want to share about volunteering and a boot camp that's coming up. So hang in at the end as well so you can find out some great information. Take it away, Pete.
Awesome. Thanks, Danielle. Great to meet everybody. Thanks for being here today. I'll give you a little background on myself and my career and give you guys some tips to working with us recruiters. And so, yeah, I said recruiting agencies here. I know we had published staffing agencies as well. Just a quick disclaimer on sort of the difference between the two. Generally, staffing agencies is used for companies that do more contract placement, and then recruiting agencies is generally more permanent placement, permanent W-2 type jobs. There's kind of a line in the sand, but they're used interchangeably pretty often. I wanted to make that distinction. So I've worked on both sides of the proverbial fence, both an internal recruiter and an external recruiter. I got my start in recruiting at Kforce. They're a huge, billion-dollar corporate staffing firm. If you're looking for IT jobs, Kforce is one of those giants that has a ton of IT jobs and you can really leverage in your search strategy, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. Then I went to work for Align. That's really where I got my start in the information security field. They're an IT audit and compliance and pen testing shop. And I was their internal recruiter and hired over 100 people in 2.5 years. That was a pretty wild ride. And then I started InfoSec Hires with a former partner of mine. We were, security recruiting firm basically. And then I started my own firm as a solopreneur, InfoSec Connect, a few years back at this point. So I've been in the security field for about 9 years and technology recruiting for over 10 now. So some examples of some positions that I've filled in the past: DFIR, forensics and incident response, IT audit and security assessment type of GRC type of roles in the security field, executives from senior director up to CISO, security operations, so building out security operations centers, security engineers, that type of thing. Then we've had some clients that they were security companies that just needed security sales and marketing people. And then when I was at Align, I filled quite a few administrative positions, so finance and accounting, marketing, that sort of thing, for when I was an internal recruiter. Types of clients I've generally worked with: large public accounting firms, large consulting firms, down to very small mom and pop sort of consulting firms, managed security service providers or MSSPs, startups, SaaS companies, up to mid-sized companies. I don't have a whole lot of enterprise clients, so most of my experience has been in the startup world, hyper-growth companies that really just need to hire as many people as humanly possible. That's kind of what I've developed a specialty for over the years, and then some fintechs as well. So some trends I'm seeing in the old market right now. It's a way different market than it was last year, and it's a way different market than it even was in Q3 of last year. So what I've noticed in tech and information security specifically, there was a huge fall off of jobs in Q3 of last year. Seemed to recover a little bit in Q4, and then Q1, all signs are extremely positive. So I've been searching as far as cybersecurity jobs. If you just type in cybersecurity under the jobs tab on LinkedIn, and then you use the search criteria of the United States, you restrict it by location. That's how I'm coming up with these numbers here. So it was only 5,000 jobs for security in October last year. Then it went up to 40,000 in December and now 61,000 in March. So it's been a pretty big uptick. There's also some other issues happening where big tech have done a ton of layoffs. Cisco just announced a huge round of layoffs. Some of the large banks are doing layoffs. All of that to say there's a lot of people on the market that weren't a year to 2 years ago. So what we have, I think, right now in tech is just a giant signal to noise ratio problem. Each open job is getting hundreds or thousands of applicants, and the people that are looking for jobs are often unemployed for months and months and months. And I don't think the unemployment numbers really accurately reflect the actual state of the market and what's going on out there. That's one thing us recruiters can tell you is what it's actually like on the ground recruiting for these types of roles, what salaries have done. So I've seen, for instance, in the governance, risk, and compliance area within information security, salaries have been going down a little bit just because of the proliferation of candidates and layoffs happening. Whereas forensics and incident response, there's been a huge surge in ransomware cases again after the Ukraine war. And that has, well, after it hit a lull because of the Ukraine war, now ransomware is increasing again. So all the DFIR firms are fighting for the same people, and it's driving salaries up. So some of these things happen on like a per role or sub-discipline of the field basis. So lots of stuff happening. I have checked the latest numbers for venture capital investment in tech. It is improving a little bit here in Q1 versus all of last year, really. But venture capital investment was way, way, way down in 2023 relative to leading up to that in the previous years. So it's a really weird time. So, but hiring is improving. I suppose that's the huge takeaway. But from what I understand, companies are still in large part a little bit shy about hiring. It seems like they're hiring for strategic roles, often more individual contributor type roles, and usually at the senior level. There's a lot less demand at the executive level right now, and there's a lot less demand for candidates at the entry level right now. So it's kind of like a bell curve, and the bell curve has been exacerbated in this market even relative to, say, a year ago. So this is kind of my advice to anybody on the call that is seeking their first security job or possibly even first IT job. There's a lot of folks looking for these jobs right now. The market is essentially flooded. So one thing I've been advising people to do is just kind of hang in there. If there's anything you can do to, take a job to pay your bills while you're looking. In some cases, the job search is taking quite a while for folks, months. I've even heard years. Don't want to freak anybody out, but that's kind of the reality on the ground for especially cybersecurity roles, since it's such an in-demand profession for folks looking to break into the field. There's been a lot of degree programs and certification companies cranking out a lot of candidates with these qualifications, and unfortunately, they're just not the differentiator that they used to be. So nowadays, the hiring managers really care most about experience, some sort of IT experience. So if you have the chance to get an internship or some sort of IT job, that's really in developing those fundamentals. That's really what the hiring managers are looking for. Also, with the proliferation of candidates on the market, as you can imagine, supply and demand, that also pushes salary a little bit down. So for instance, for folks looking to break into security, there's some boot camps promising, 100K security jobs. That's just not the reality on the ground. The reality is probably more like 40 to 60 for an entry-level SOC analyst role, for instance. So keep that in mind. And sometimes these jobs kind of suck. There's no way around it. It's kind of a grind. People get alert fatigue. That's a real term that's been coined. But at the same time, it's a stepping stone, I think, to a really rewarding career in security. And one of the things that security hiring managers look for is that quote unquote passion in the field. People that are, studying in their off time, that are building home labs, that are attending conferences and volunteering, stuff like that. Those all go quite a long way. And I'll go into some more, tactical job search strategies here in a little bit as far as finding a mentor, which communities to engage with, things like that to help you in your job search. But yeah, in the long term, once you have your foot in the door of security or even IT, the world is your oyster, essentially. Once you get to that mid to senior individual contributor level, then recruiters are going to be knocking down your door to get to you. Less in this market, but in general, the job market's probably going to improve in the next year or two. By the time you start building some experience, you'll be more in demand and the market will have improved by that point. You have to be prepared though for those market fluctuations. I can tell you as a recruiter, it's been a wild couple of years. I was busier than I've ever been in 2022. Then 2023 had basically no business. And then 2024, it's starting to get busy again. So it's very much a roller coaster. That's just the state of the market right now in some larger, I suppose, economy-wide type of issues that we're seeing that affects the job market in a big way. So what do us recruiters do? One thing I think a lot of people get wrong in trying to understand what recruiters do is people assume that recruiters find jobs for people, when in reality, we find people for jobs. So whether you're an internal recruiter or an external recruiter, and as you can see here, there's some differences. Our job as recruiters is to fill a job for our clients or our company if we're an internal recruiter. At the end of the day, we're going out, we're finding people, or we're fielding applicants for our open jobs that we're posting, and we're making sure that we're only presenting the best fits to the hiring manager. So essentially, in a way, we're kind of gatekeepers. And I know that term can have some negative press sometimes, but at the end of the day, our responsibility is to find the best possible fit for the job and not find jobs for people. But I did want to make that distinction. That does not mean that we're not on your side, though. As recruiters, good recruiters do care about the people they work with, and they do want to help people find, in a sense, we want to help match people with rewarding careers, those of us that are in it for the right reasons anyway. But yeah, so internal recruiters, that's like when I worked for Align. I was one recruiter working for the company, and I was responsible for finding all of their auditors and pen testers and back office staff. And I was an employee of the company, finding people for the company. That's an internal recruiter. An external recruiter is what I do now. My company, InfoSec Connect, companies hire my firm to find them people. In most cases, us external recruiters, the jobs we get are highly specialized. They're senior. These are tough to find people that often never need to look for a job a day in their lives. That's why they hire us and pay us, because we're able to find those folks. So I run a recruiting firm that's InfoSec Connect, and I'm an external recruiter. And then the way that we're paid as external recruiters is a little bit different than internal recruiters. Us external recruiters, we get paid by the company, again, not by the candidate, but by the company that's hiring for the position. Once somebody starts, that's called contingency. Or sometimes we'll get a retainer up front to fill that job, and that's called retained search. But either way, it's the company paying our bills, not the candidates. So that's why, we're finding people for the jobs, not jobs for the people. Internal recruiters, they're paid by the company that hires them, and sometimes they'll get little bonuses for placements that they make, but usually it's not large commissions like the external recruiters. So again, some of these things I've already covered, but in either case, whether we're an internal recruiter or external recruiter, it's very rare that we have an incentive to lowball candidates. That's a common misconception that, recruiters want to get you for as little money as possible just so we can make more money. That's not really the case. The only time in which that can be true, and it's mostly, I think, with unethical recruiters or folks that aren't in it for the long term, is when they're doing contract placements, in which case the recruiting firm will get the spread between what the candidate is paid and what the client is paying, called the bill rate, versus the pay rate to the candidate. So that's the only situation in which there's some sort of incentive to lowball candidates. But for the vast majority of roles, for all the permanent placements that I make, the more money I get for my candidates, the more money I get from the company. That said, we also have to balance the expectations of the hiring manager. So our goal as recruiters is to find a salary that both works for you as well as a salary that works for the hiring manager. And unfortunately, those don't always match up. So sometimes we have to kind of find a happy middle ground depending on the individual. But as I mentioned before, internal recruiters work for the company, and they'll often recruit for every department within the company. And that's why I think often internal recruiters have a hard time specializing, because they have such a wide variety of roles that they fill. They may fill the marketing assistant to the accounting manager to the CISO, and those are all very different roles, and it's difficult for them to develop a specialty or to get truly deep and really understand those roles on a deeper level. Whereas us external recruiters, oftentimes we've branded ourselves such that we're specialists in a given area or industry. In my case, it's information security. That's all I've done. Some of my sweet spots are DFIR, GRC, offensive security, and I've been working for years and years in these niche verticals. That's usually not the case for internal recruiters, but that's also why we make the big bucks, because we're really specialized and we understand how to find these folks that are so hard to find and attract as well. One thing that us recruiting firms do as well that's of benefit to the end company is that we offer some sort of guarantee, usually 90 days. And then, for my firm, it's replacement. So if I were to recruit one of you guys and get you hired at one of my clients, I would get paid up front once you're started. And then once you've started, I would offer a guarantee period for, say, 90 days. If you don't work out in the first 90 days, I would need to find your replacement. But our goal as external or internal recruiters is always to find people that are going to stick around for the long term. It's pretty rare that you'll find a recruiter that just wants to make the placement, get the money, and move on. I think that used car salesman sort of stereotype, it's not as common as you might think. And we can kind of go over some of the, misconceptions about recruiters here in a bit. Either way, though, whether it's an internal or external recruiter, everything we do is highly stressful. We're extremely busy. Ask any recruiter, they'll tell you they have 25 tabs open on their browser at all times. It's really important to stay organized. There's a lot going on. And I think a lot of the ghosting that happens is because people are just disorganized or they're not incentivized to get back to people from recruiting management. And that's a different topic. Don't get me started. So yeah, as I'd mentioned before, kind of who we work for, this is really just to recap what I said so far. Salaries paid by the company for internal recruiters. For external recruiters, they pay us commissions, and usually it's based on individuals versus like an ongoing sort of retainer, though that is an approach I've considered offering given the state of the market. So yeah, we, like I said before, really have no incentive to lowball you guys, and then recruiters do find people for jobs, not jobs for people. Recruiters do not also purposefully ghost people. And I can tell you a little bit about why I think ghosting is so prevalent. I think it's really an issue with recruiting management. So, and the idea that companies are posting jobs and getting thousands of applicants, and it's not practical for them to get back to every single applicant. I would argue that it can be, because you can one-click reject people. That's where you get that automated looking email. In most applicant tracking systems, there is that functionality. You just have to set up a template and make it a priority. But most recruiting firms don't. And I think the reason they don't is because the recruiting teams are incentivizing recruiters to hit all their numbers, their metrics. It's very, very much about KPIs. Did you make a certain amount of outbound dials today? Did you, talk to so many people? Did you submit so many resumes? It's all about volume, and it's highly stressful, and it's a very kind of hard salesy type of way of running recruiting. That's kind of the old school way of doing recruiting, but I think it's extremely prevalent even still. And I think those metrics and KPIs lead to a lot of this ghosting. That and the fact that people are posting jobs instead of going out to the market and finding people, which would cut down on a lot of that ghosting. But we're not all bad. You'll see a lot of stories on LinkedIn about bad recruiters. No shortage of those for sure. But for anybody who's worked with a good one, you'll understand that it really is a night and day difference. So here's some advantages to working with us recruiters. One thing is we'll give you boots on the ground, live salary data. And I can't tell you how hard it is to keep track of salary data if you're just looking at salary.com or Glassdoor or whatever else, whatever site out there. So for instance, if I were to go look for a security analyst salary on LinkedIn, it might be, $80,000 to $150,000 or some crazy range like that. And there's no standardization of job titles across the industry either. So, security analyst could be an ISSO for a government contract and they could make 150, or a security analyst could be a SOC analyst and maybe they're level 1 and they could be making 60K. So it's just really hard to get good salary data online. That's where us specialist recruiters can really help you out, just to kind of level set expectations as far as who's paying what. And obviously salaries are going to vary a lot depending on geography. New York and San Francisco are going to be like double what it, almost anywhere else in the country is going to be. Stuff like that we can give you the lowdown on. And then to, what certain companies are doing. So for instance, I do a lot of work in the governance, risk, and compliance sector within InfoSec. So I know what the trends in the industry are. Like right now, it's all about automation, and the automation platforms, they're taking a lot of market share from the traditional consulting firms, and that's where all the venture capital money is flowing. And that's really the best place to go right now, is the automation platforms within GRC, because they're essentially rocket ships and you're hitching your wagon to company on the way up versus on the way out. So those little sort of intangible things about the market we can help you out with. And provided you contact the right recruiter, some of my competitors are so busy that they're getting people like 50, 100 people reaching out to them every single day. And I've even seen them make posts where they just come out and say, I can't get back to everybody. It's just too much. But if you get somebody who has an extra minute here or there, like I do a bunch of free career guidance calls for folks and resume reviews and stuff, we can help you out with, interview preps. If you're interviewing for a client of ours or an external recruiter, we can help you with resumes and stuff like that. I do advise people, and this will come up later, but I advise people to be careful of resume writers. You could pay $500 and get a resume that's not recruiter friendly. It's actually really common. I've talked to a few executives lately that did that. So yeah, be wary and try and work with the specialist recruiters within your niche if possible. And yeah, I mean, sometimes if you're curious about what the next step in your career should be, or, kind of what you're thinking about, that sort of thing. Again, that's why I do my career guidance calls, to help people with those types of conversations and thought processes. Want to really help people understand where the opportunity is in the industry, what to expect, and things like that. And then LinkedIn profile as well. I've actually done a talk on this, but I can help you optimize your LinkedIn profile. I spend all of my time as a recruiter on LinkedIn, almost all of it. It's that and referrals, and then talking to people. That's about it. And any good recruiter within security, at least, is going to be strictly focused on LinkedIn. There's not a job board out there like Career Builder or Dice or anything like that that really works for the security industry for whatever reason. So all of the good recruiters are on LinkedIn. So if you're able to be found on LinkedIn through lots of good keywords, optimization, all that good stuff, that'll serve you very well throughout your career. So to that point, how to approach recruiters. A lot of the best thing you can do as far as approaching recruiters is actually to be approached. If you're searchable for us through our search strings, like I do complex Boolean search strings when I search for candidates for my open jobs. If you have open and new opportunities turned on and you have lots of good keywords, it's going to be much easier to find you, and you're going to rise to the top of any search result that we get. So when I do a complex Boolean search, I might get, if it's really specific, sometimes I'll only get 5 people that show up for a search if my client's really picky, which is usually. Or, if it's a more general role, I might get 500 pages of results. And then over the next few days, I'll go through thousands upon thousands upon thousands of LinkedIn profiles. So if you can be seen first and you're at the top of the search results, your chances of getting a message from a recruiter are much, much higher. And then when we do a search for specific people with keywords, the keywords are actually highlighted in your resume or in your LinkedIn profile, whether it's an applicant tracking system or LinkedIn. Either way, it lights up like a Christmas tree when we see the keywords on your resume. So it's a really quick way for us to scan resumes and LinkedIn profiles. And I don't know if you've heard the statistic, but 5 to 10 seconds is all recruiters spend on average looking at your resume or LinkedIn profile. That's why it's extremely, extremely crucial to have everything optimized, easy to read, and have lots of good keywords in there. Another piece of advice is kind of ironic given the title of this talk, how to work with recruiters. I often advise people in my career guidance calls to just skip the recruiters if you can. If there's a job that looks particularly interesting to you on LinkedIn, sometimes you can do a little bit of open source intelligence gathering, figure out who that hiring manager might be. In some cases, it'll actually say on the job posting, this role reports to GRC manager or director of security operations. And then you can search within that company's LinkedIn page. So you go to their company page, you click on employees, and that'll be a hyperlink. It'll list every single employee working at that company. Then you filter by location, and then you type in the search box the title of the hiring manager or what you think it might be. And usually you can find that person. And then you have about 200 characters in a connection request. to do basically a full elevator pitch about why you think you're a fit for that open role. And I've had people tell me that works and actually has gotten people jobs before. It's a way to kind of break through the noise when, there's hundreds or thousands of applicants to each job. Sometimes you got to get really creative with your job search strategy. So continuous networking as well. I mean, really the ideal situation is to be working constantly with recruiters in your niche as well as hiring managers. Just always be working on building that network. The best time to do it is always today if you haven't been doing it previously. I've been working with quite a few executives recently, CISOs, that they really kind of slacked on their networking, and now they're on the job hunt and they're CISOs and they're still struggling to find a job because they neglected their network because they were comfortable in their role for 4 or 5 years. So it's really crucial to always be making new connections and adding people on LinkedIn that you've met at networking events and stuff like that. You're way more likely to get jobs from people that are referrals or that know you than really anything else, especially just applying online. And then, obviously make sure specialist recruiters have your resume, or generalist recruiters that get the type of jobs that you would be looking for. So I'll cover that here in a second as far as some specific firms. But yeah, tips and tricks to working with this. I mean, this is really simple, common sense stuff. Respect going both ways. I'll have some people that'll get hostile with me or, be reluctant to schedule something or really demand a certain way to schedule something. Like I reach out to people and I put my Calendly link in the invite because it's the most efficient. They're able to just click, select a time, and then boom, it's easy versus going back and forth 20 times to find a time that works for both parties. So don't let your ego get the best of you. Just go with the flow and work with the recruiter and they're going to work with you. Keep that resume formatting simple. If anybody's curious, I can send you mine. Super simple. 1, 2, 3 sentence summary, something like that. Then education inserts, then go straight into your experience, dates on the right-hand side, titles on the left-hand side, companies and job titles on the left-hand side in bold, and you're good. And then some good bullet points about what you've done. It's really that simple. I get a lot of questions on the salary aspect, and I think a lot of people are hesitant to discuss salary. One, because of the culture that we live in the US, it's sort of, I don't know, people find it difficult to talk about salary in this country. When a recruiter asks you what you're looking for, be honest. If you have a number in mind, tell them what it is. If you don't have a number in mind, tell them that. Say, look, I honestly don't know what the going rate is for my experience. Would love to hear your thoughts. And if they're a specialist, there's a good chance they're going to be able to tell you. And if your salary expectation is off, they'll tell you that as well. If they're for the specific role they're working on, if their salary range is not what you're looking for, they'll tell you that as well. And that goes back to the point from earlier. We really have no incentive to lowball you guys. We want to get you as much money as we can, as long as we feel confident that the hiring manager is going to be okay with it as well. So we're on the same team. We're all rowing in the same direction. Common mistakes, this kind of goes back to earlier, just be easy to work with. It's really that simple. Be willing to talk on the phone. Some folks I talk to, I'll correspond with them on LinkedIn and send them a message. I've included a fair amount of details in that. I usually send a bullet point list about why the client is great, why the opportunity is great. But sometimes people will respond to that and all they'll do is just ask a bunch of questions, or they'll just say salary ? Don't recommend that. That's going to turn a lot of people off. If you are going to ask about salary up front, at least formulate it as a full sentence. It just comes off better that way. But generally, the best way to do it is just schedule a phone call. Most recruiter screens are only 15 minutes or so, maybe 30. If it's with an internal recruiter and they're really thorough, you might have an hour-long recruiter screen, but that is pretty rare. And be flexible in scheduling. You ought to see our calendars as recruiters. It's like literally back to back to back all day, every day when we're busy. So try and be as flexible as you can. Obviously understand you have lives too, so no worries. Just work with the person. And then don't lie or give one-word answers. Again, this seems simple, but over the years, I've talked to quite a few people that don't do these things. They'll give one-word answers. They're very hesitant to share information. One of my core values as a company and as an individual really is transparency. And I think you really catch a lot more flies with honey, as they say, and being transparent. Recruiters have no incentive to try and screw you over. So knowing that, just be as transparent as you can be, obviously within reason. Don't give them your whole life story, but let them know what's going on. and they're more apt to want to work with you that way. So here's some tips to find your first security job. And obviously I understand not all the audience is going to be security people, but a lot of this stuff will go for IT folks as well. One of the first things I ask people in my career guidance calls for people looking to break into security is, why do you want to do security? Often I'll hear the answer, well, I heard the pay was good, or the opposite end of the spectrum, I'll hear, well, I've been tinkering with computers since I was 6. This is just a passion of mine, always has been. I'm fascinated with how the way things work. I will say usually the second answer is what hiring managers prefer to hear, and it is difficult to break into the field. So if money is your only motivator, maybe reconsider. There are other ways to make good money, and security is so tough to break into. You might want to consider going into IT and working your way up that trajectory first and making some money that way. But always know your why and be able to explain that to the recruiter or the hiring manager. That's where a lot of people, I think, get caught that are entry level, is they don't have a good reason why. So always be able to answer that. Networking is key, both understanding networking, IT infrastructure, but then also networking on LinkedIn, in-person events, volunteering at B-sides, going to meetup groups, going to events like this, all great ways to meet people and start kind of building your own personal professional brand. Finding a mentor, that one is so key. Most people I see get entry-level security jobs, it's because they have a mentor that referred them to somebody else they know, and the job was never posted online. It was somebody that had this mentee, they understood how amazing the mentee was, and they were able to directly recommend that person to a hiring manager, and that job never hit the market. In security, I would say at any given time, there's maybe 100 entry-level security jobs in the US, in all of the US, 100. And I would say there's probably 10,000 people trying to break into the industry right now. So not a great ratio. That's why it is so important to find some of these sort of back channel ways to get your first security job. And it's all about who you know, absolutely. And then being persistent, as I'd said before, that's so crucial. Just sticking with it. And that's another reason why it's important to analyze your why. If your why is one of those reasons where you're willing to stick it out for months or years trying to break into the field, you're probably good. But if your why is something where you're not willing to stick it out for that long, then again, it may be time to consider something else. Focus on building experience versus certifications. I'd mentioned that before. Hiring managers, that's basically all they want. They want soft skills and experience, period. So anything you can do to build experience and show them that you're easy to work with, that you're going to solve more problems than you create, that's really what they're looking for. And if anybody's curious, you can check out my podcast, Talent Gap Fireside Chat. I'm thinking of one I just did with Brent Dieterding. He was talking about what he looks for in entry-level folks. That's the logo behind me, actually. But it's a great resource to kind of get in the heads of hiring managers and see what they look for. As I'd mentioned before, in approaching hiring managers directly on LinkedIn, you really have to, in this market, do whatever you possibly can to supersede your competition, which is other job seekers, and go above and beyond and just follow strategies that nobody else is. You really got to get creative, think outside the box. And again, recruiters can help you with this type of stuff, provided they give you some of their time. Most entry-level jobs are not posted. I mentioned that. And then building a brand on LinkedIn is important. These days, you almost kind of have to be like a little mini influencer, much as I hate that term and the idea that you need to be an influencer to be a job seeker. Personally, I think it's a little silly, but anymore it is important. People have to know your face and know your communication style, and LinkedIn is the single best way to do that. If you guys are curious, Nicholas Moy advises people on how to do this. He actually presented for IC Squared down here in Tampa. He really knows his stuff, and he can advise you on how to really build your presence on LinkedIn and build a personal brand and stuff like that. So some other communities, say you're looking for a security job, there's a lot here, and I don't know if we can send out this presentation later, or, if you guys add me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to send you some of these resources. But in person, those are the ones I'd really focus on, because you'll make lasting connections that way. People that have seen your face, they're more likely to recommend you. You just build deeper connections that way. So meetup groups, local hacker spaces, sometimes through Meetup, and then local chapters of, in the security world, IC Squared, well, it's IC2 now, ISSA, ISACA, if you're GRC oriented, those are all good for security. I would imagine there's similar groups for IT. You would just have to kind of Google it and then look on meetup.com. Like there's Tampa Bay Tech, I know. There's a few others, but those types of meetups and networking events, definitely good to do. If you're in security, Access Cyber has a bunch of really, really good resources for you. If you're in or looking to be in security, I should say. So if you check out their community tab, it'll have a list of a bunch of subreddits. It'll have a list of a bunch of Discord channels, and Discord channels are a great place. Same thing, I believe, with subreddits, but I know for sure Discord channels are great places to find mentors. So they'll usually have a mentor or a mentee section where mentors can search for mentees and mentees can search for mentors. And if you're really engaged in those communities, it'll be even easier to get a good mentor. And again, get referred to those roles that don't even hit the market. LinkedIn, as I'd mentioned, recruiters and hiring managers, I would network with both. You can use some of the job boards, Indeed, Career Builder, those guys, Dice. If you're in IT, Dice is pretty decent, but if you're in security, not so much. But these can be used to at least apply to jobs. And to the point from earlier about working with recruiters, if you post or if you apply to a job with a recruiter on their website, your resume is basically in their database then. So for good or for ill, they'll have your phone number and your email, and they will call you if they search their database and they get relevant jobs. So that's one way to leverage external recruiters, is just apply to jobs in their database. If you are in IT, it would be like Robert Half, Tech Systems, Kelly Services here locally in St. Pete. There's a few others that are, big names. Just search for, IT staffing or IT recruiting, and you'll find a bunch. And then just look at their websites and their job boards and apply to some stuff. Referrals networking, I already talked about. Alumni student networks, that can help sometimes going through your school, or if your certification you got has some sort of network like that. It's just another avenue. And then I can send you guys this if you're curious. It's a list of security recruiters in the US. So it's a whole almost comprehensive list of every security recruiter in the US, external recruiters. I have that if you guys connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, it's really most useful when you have a specific job in mind and you're more at the senior level, but it's good to have in your back pocket just to know, which security recruiting firms are out there that you can engage with long term. And again, you can apply to jobs in their database to be notified of new jobs.
To learn more about our training programs, classes, and what sets us apart, please visit our website at www.computercoach.com.